Hi everyone, my name is Julie Mann. I am a professional network marketer. I'm an actor and I'm also an EFT practitioner and coach. And today I'm joined by one of my favourite people in the whole world, CiCi Collins. I know her as CiCi. Hi, C.
Hi, Jules.
I cannot believe that you and I actually met over 40 years ago in Cardiff, didn't we, at the Welsh College of Music and Drama?
Yes, 40 years, Jules. My goodness gracious me. Wow.
I know. And you were doing the postgrad course. I was doing the performance course. We didn't really get to know each other at college. I saw you perform and thought you were amazing. And then when our training was over, we both got offered a job by the South Glamorgan Health Authority. And you and I and a group of other people were travelling around Wales, all parts of Wales, doing a show in schools called Sleuth, weren't we?
We did. All over.
That you were playing Jemima Joe.
I was.
And I was playing Candy Carys because it was all about dental hygiene. It was a kind of a detective thing, wasn't it? Yeah. Anyhow, I want you to think back to that time, because obviously a lot has changed. You've done many, many things since then. But I want you to think back, and tell me who you, looking back, thought you were then, and what your aspirations were.
Wow, that's quite a tricky question, really. I had by then already been a teacher for 7 years. I taught in Australia for 3 years, and I'd embarked on doing this 1-year course down at the Welsh College of Music and Drama. And so it was an exciting time. It was an exciting time and a scary time as well, because I'd given up my career in teaching in order to be a student again. I just, you know what, I kind of remember laughing a lot. Scary, but laughing a lot. I mean, you and I have both laughed a lot and continue to laugh for the last 40 years. But it was fun and it was exciting and I felt fairly fearless, I think, actually.
Brilliant. And when you left college, and we kind of parted company, didn't we? We went separate routes, and I know that you worked for the RSC, didn't you, on Broadway? So tell us a little bit about how that was.
Again, I mean, I'm somebody who hasn't and continues really not to have any plans as to what's going to happen in my life, and that it just happened. So I ended up actually understudying in the West End, and then was asked to, when the show went to New York, to go with it. And again, I mean, wow, what an opportunity. 6 months in New York. My dad had just died, actually, so it was kind of came at the right time. And just enormously exciting to be on Broadway for 6 months.
I know that you describe yourself as a bit of an introvert, which actually is hard to believe, especially, you know, for someone who sees you perform. So what is an introvert?
Yes, I kind of think I'm an extroverted introvert, if such a thing exists. I like being on my own. I need time on my own. I think if I think of myself back then, I think I created almost a persona which was fun. You know, people used to think I was a fun girl, but actually I really wasn't. And after a show in the evening, you know, other people would be going off to parties and things. That was the last thing in the world I wanted to do. Just not happy in that environment, really. So you know, and that has been and continues to be. So silent retreats is something that, you know, later on have been important with myself, and to kind of, to really know myself at a much deeper level.
I think that it would be fair to say that going back 40 years ago, or thereabouts, you weren't thinking about silent retreats and getting to know yourself in the same kind of way that obviously in the way that your journey took you. So what happened after you decided to, I don't know, stop acting and do something else?
Well, actually, that's not entirely right, Jules, because I was going to go to Taizé in the south of France, which is a community, and I was going to go there. I also was thinking of going to an ashram in India back in the 80s. Went as far as kind of filling in the application form, and but I think and in the 70s I did transcendental meditation, and so that's always been kind of somewhere in the background, that other world. So there was the world of the theatre and being out there, and I seem to quite often get jobs as prostitutes or call girls or something like that, sort of kind of big characters, and and there was this other side of me that's sort of almost nun-like. So and actually one of my favorite books ever was Narcissus and Goldman by Hermann Hesse, and because I kind of just felt like those two things running either side of my life, and still do in many ways. But I think what really then changed it was that in 2010, my beloved middle sister Mickey died very unexpectedly, and the dealing with her death and dealing with a couple of months later overnight developing quite severe tinnitus, I just, that has set me on a journey of how to not the tinnitus, but how I relate to the tinnitus, because it's something that, for anyone else that has it, it's something that for some people doesn't go away. That's not to say that I don't think one day it might, but if I'm in that place of, oh gosh, maybe it'll be gone today, I'm that's an area of suffering for me. So it's much more important for me to kind of open it up and open up to it, welcome it, invite it.
A lot of that stuff I wasn't actually aware of. So it's really great to hear you tell me that stuff now. A lot of it I was aware of, but some of it not. You mentioned about being nun-like, and I know that you have had a Catholic upbringing. So tell us a little bit about that.
You know what, I think it's probably a generational thing as well, but for the most part, I had a very down-to-earth mum and dad who I could go and say, hey, you'll never guess what today, opened up Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, and God, she had a swimming costume on, so do you know the picture that I'm talking about, Jules?
Yes.
She's in that shell with her hair, and the nuns were very, very dedicated to educating us. Once a Catholic, once a Catholic.
So you say that, I haven't had a Catholic upbringing. So what exactly do you mean by that?
Things like guilt, I think. Things like, my dad was very, very active in raising money, and kind of was out there helping the world when maybe he could have been a little bit more present at home. He was a lovely man, both my mum and my dad. I'm very, very blessed to have lovely, lovely parents. But it's an interesting one, because unless you're a Catholic, and unless you've had that Catholic background, and unless you that has been kind of part of your early years. It's difficult to be able to explain it.
Okay, so what aspects of the teaching that you experience in terms of Catholicism would you say that you've taken with you, and what parts of it would you say that you've left behind?
I've taken with me the belief that there is something greater than us. But that is not outside of us, is within us. I have left behind the formalities of going to mass every Sunday, and unconsciously maybe going to those services and then not really just not really realizing or being conscious on a daily basis of something within us all that links us all and is very interconnected. So for me, in a way, religions, it's almost loath to go there, but it's the interconnectedness of human beings, that underneath we are all connected. And we all have our limited self, the self that we're trying to put over, or the self that we think we should be in order to be able to be who we think we are, or who we think other people think we should be, to actually really write down to the nitty-gritty of that spacious awareness.
I mentioned earlier that you and I kind of went in different directions for a while, and then I tracked you down. And many years later, I remember us meeting at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. Yeah. And things had changed so much for you. And I know that you'd become you trained in anger management, and you'd also trained in stress management, and actually there were probably a lot of people that are thinking, what is anger management, what is stress management? Can you say more about that?
I just find anger extremely interesting. Stress, the world that we live in, again, the world that we live in does not cause our stress, our attitude to the world that we live in. So some people will find some things very stressful, other people maybe not. I like to break stress down. When I did my training, fantastic training, I have to say, with the British Association of Anger Management, most of it, which has stayed with me, well, all of it stayed with me several years later. We worked with a model of 8 feelings: happy, sad, angry, scared, peaceful, powerful, hurt, and shame. And if somebody says to me that they feel stressed, I would say, how does that feel? And for some people, it might be anger, it might be fear, it might be sadness. And, part of being human is being one of those things or all of those things at the same time. So I felt that after my beloved sister died, I walked like 2 plates in the Earth's stratosphere, of sometimes feeling joy and happiness. But for several years, actually, there was this sadness that was just there. It's just there. And through being with it rather than running away from it, and that's led to as I'm very interested in grief and bereavement and death. I'm reading a book about death at the moment, and so that how we deal with stress, how we deal with bereavement, how we deal with anger, how, of course, bereavement very much as well includes anger, encompasses many of those feelings. So I'm not sure that I've really answered your question particularly, and I've moved my cushion, so I'm a little bit skew with, but that's okay.
That was brilliant. So, you know, a lot of us have not been brought up to express our emotions, and there are some emotions that we tend to like, the happy, you know, the peaceful, we like those. But on the whole, a lot of people don't like anger, certainly wouldn't like shame or sadness. So how can anyone listening who perhaps might be feeling one or all of those things change that state, or how can they address those feelings that they have? Or what would you say? Have you got any sort of tips or advice for?
Well, I think the first thing is to allow yourself to feel it. I think the problem with anger for a lot of people is that they don't have a model of how to express anger in a powerful way, in a way that heals rather than hurts or harms. And for many of us, you know, I've worked with many people now in groups, and actually have been, until fairly recently, running a bereavement program in a prison. And of course, anger comes up a fair bit. Their early years and their early years examples, experience of anger hasn't always been a healthy one. So I think to understand that you feel what you feel, for that to be okay, and, you know, and then to hold it with enormous care and compassion. What we tend to do is actually wag the finger at ourselves. I shouldn't. There's a whole load of shoulds and shouldn't. I shouldn't feel like this, or they shouldn't have done that to me, or it shouldn't be like this. And, you know, as we know, what we resist persists. So just to allow ourselves to feel it, because it also sits in the body. There are some great books. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, I think his name is, has written a wonderful book, The Body Keeps the Score. There's another wonderful book by Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Cause of Stress. And, you know, he's behind the title of the book is that if we don't say no, and we don't kind of create boundaries for ourselves, eventually the body will step in and do it for us, by it becoming in some way ill or affected in some way. So I think, you know, the other thing as well, and that's from a now very regular mindful practice of many years, of actually dropping down into the body, feeling where that anger, sadness, joy, whatever it is, sits in the body, rather than the narrative and the stories that the head will provide, the mind will provide, because the mind will provide all kinds of narrative and stories, most of which are not true. As Tara Brach would say, you know, our thoughts are very real, but most of the time not true.
I love that. So I believe there are a number of different types of anger, aren't there? It's not just anger. Am I right there?
Well, do you mean sort of like passive aggressive,
Yeah.
passive? Yeah, I mean, some people shoot from the hip. That's
What does
the
that
kind of
actually mean? See, what does that expression mean?
shoot from the hip. Well, to completely lose it straight away and say what they want to say, you know, whether we react or whether we respond. So an aggression would be, and they're all learnt behaviours, by the way. So or an interrogator, you know, who were you with? Where were you? How long were you there? What did you do? Or passive, where it's like I don't feel, or I'm not going to say anything because it's really important that I don't rock the boat. I mustn't upset anyone here. Passive aggressive, a sort of the velvet dagger. So I'm angry with you, but I'm not going to let you know. I'm not going to let you know in an obvious way. So I'm going to kind of, I might say, oh, hello, Jules, lovely to see you. Look at you. Don't you look well? And then go off to someone else. You know that Julie Mann. God, do you know what she did? So that kind of passive aggressive, when we don't feel safe enough to actually say, Jules, something happened the other week. I'd really like to kind of share that. I mean, that's actually one of the things I so appreciate about my relationship with you, Jules. We always clear, you know, a relationship that goes back as long as it has done, and has gone down as many paths and different paths of both of us have. You know, there are going to be times when it's like, oh, oh, but there's always been that space of safety with us, and that kind of openness that's been so important to me, that allows that healing actually to happen, to be able to say, you know. And of course, one of the massive things about anger, and one of the triggers around anger, is taking things personally. And when we begin in some way to kind of get some kind of understanding, and it's almost beyond understanding, that nothing is personal, life changes.
I absolutely agree with all that you're saying. And you and I have both had the benefit of, you know, doing various courses and learning and reading and growing and trying stuff out. And there may be people watching who have never done any of the things that we've done. So is there, you know, are there some simple things that people can benefit from right now without having to necessarily go and see someone or read a book? Or right now, are there some simple practices? Because you talked about, you know, dropping down into the body, but of course that does demand, firstly, that you're still, that you stop doing what you're doing in order to do that dropping down. So say more.
Well, I think we are on automatic pilot very often. We kind of get in the car, and no sooner are we in the car than our mind is on the road. We might not have even put our key into the ignition, but we're off. And it's where accidents happen, actually, where our mind is almost out of our body and operating independently. So just finding mini moments throughout the day, mini moments where, if you're at the computer, just putting your feet on the ground, feeling your feet, feeling a sense of being held by the floor that you're on, by the ground underneath, taking a breath. Very often, if we are highly stressed and there's a lot happening and we've got a lot going on, we begin to almost breathe from the top, and you'll find your voice is getting a little bit higher and higher and higher, because I've got this and I've got that to do, and I'm really, really busy. Blah, 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 blah. Take a deep breath. Just drop down into the belly, put your hands on your tummy, and just mini moments throughout the day. The other thing I think that's been massively important to me is to kind of really have an inquiry. And it's important to note that an inquiry doesn't look for answers. An inquiry is kind of opening up from a wider space. What's the role, for instance, that a word like should plays in my life? And realizing that the root of that word comes from authority. It comes from someone else saying, well, this is what you should do, really. You know, when you're little, you should do this, and you should tidy up your room, and you shouldn't shout, and you shouldn't do this, and you should eat your food, blah, 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 blah. And then we go to school, and then we go to work, and our bosses say, you should do this, and you should, blah, blah. And then our partners say, well, you should have phoned, blah, blah, blah. And we wonder why we're kind of triggered by it. Even just a little minor shift neurologically of the language that we use, which is really important, and changing, just reframing that should into could, or even reframing sentences, taking a sentence that we kind of, you know, we constantly have little comments about ourselves, like I'm no good at that, or well, I can't do that, or I, you know, a biggie, I haven't got time. So actually making time is enormously important, you know, particularly, for instance, if you have young children around. You need to be filling up your emotional tank to make sure that you are filling up that emotional tank so that you can look after others. You know, the old on the plane and the oxygen mask comes down. Who do you put the oxygen mask on? You or the child? And you put it on the child. That's what you're instructed to do. So those are a couple of things that kind of come to mind. You know, just having a felt sense of, even as we're sitting now, just really focusing on your bottom on the chair. Just imagine, you know, just kind of noticing, am I holding on anywhere? It's enormously, you know, there's a book, The Dubliners, by James Joyce. I think it's The Dubliners, where he talks about a character called Mr. Duffy. And he said, Mr. Duffy lives a short space from his body. And many of us are just not in our body. So that level of presence and awareness, and taking care of it. Who knows when it's going to go, you know?
Yes, being kind to us is so, so important, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So if anyone wants to find out more about you, CiCi, how can they do that?
My email is that what I would do? I don't really have I don't have a website anymore. All of my work, all of the work that I get is recommendations. So it's God, I can't think what the expression is. Word of mouth. Word of mouth. My email address. I mean, I also run a mindfulness session, and on Facebook there's something called Mindfulness Grantham, and anybody can leave a message on there should they want to have a chat or should they want to ask any questions. My email, what is it? CiCi Collins 23 at gmail.com.
CiCi Collins.
CiCi Collins. COLL, like Joan, COLLINS 23 at gmail.com.
And your phone number?
07702 696940.
It's just like an infomercial, Cecilia. Those acting days are not gone, my darling. Yeah, before we finish, any words of wisdom, anything you'd really like to say?
There is a wonderful quote by a man called Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a book about being in a concentration camp. Oh my goodness, and I can't remember the title. It's something like The Meaning. Can't remember the title, but
Search for meaning and purpose.
No, I've got it up. Anyway, he says, between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power and our freedom.
Love that.
I just love that quote, that between the stimulus and the response, there is a response. And in that space lies our power and our freedom. So if we can, the stimulus being whatever it is, between the stimulus and how I respond to that rather than react, creating a little space, how to use my deep, deep wisdom. Use our deep, deep wisdom.
CiCi Collins, I could just talk to you for another 40 years. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom and our continuing friendship.
Oh, my darling. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.